All right. Welcome, everybody, to episode number 3 of the Vintage Spotlight podcast. My name is Jeremy Lee. I'm also the host of Sports Cards Live, and I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Leighton Sheldon of Just Collect, and the host of the Trading Card Therapy podcast. Leighton, here we go. Episode number 3. The National is next week, right around the corner. We're going to get into that. We have a guest, Jeffrey Hart, also Patriot Sports Cards on Instagram. But before we get into things, Leighton, how's the last few days been for you?
I'm very focused, and I'm also excited because my son got home from vacation with his mother yesterday. So I'll get to see him and spend some time together. And really, I'm super excited. Any national to me is a good national. So I'm really excited about the show. I'm also excited about today's show because I know Jeff a little bit from a prior time that we've met. And I'm excited about what we're going to talk about in today's episode.
All right. Well, as we like to kick things off on the Vintage Spotlight, we start with some key vintage sales. And this episode's key vintage sales, they're kind of in that almost vintage. It depends what you consider to be vintage because they are from the 80s. But we wanted to look at basketball cards today because our guest, Jeff, is a serious basketball card collector. Let's bring Jeff out right now. Mr. Jeff Hart, Patriot _Sports Cards. Welcome to Vintage Spotlight. It's great to have you. Are you excited for the National?
I'm excited for the National, and I'm excited for Vintage Spotlight. I'm so happy that you guys have put a spotlight on vintage collecting. We don't have enough good content out there about that. So very excited.
All right. It's great to have you. Let's jump in to the key vintage sales segment of the show. Leighton, we have 2 cards that ended on Heritage. They are both Michael Jordans, and we're going to have a discussion about them here. Let's take a look at what happened here on Heritage. Back on July the 12th, only 4 days ago, we had a PSA 10 Michael Jordan 86 Fleer, commonly known as his rookie card, sells for $198,000. And then we had, on the same night, we had his 1984 Star number 101 in a PSA 7 holder, sell for $37,200. And guys, we all know this. There's a divide in the hobby. Which is the rookie card? Which is the better card to own? Should you own both? Should you only own one? Let's get right into it. Leighton, let's get your opening thoughts on the topic.
Well, first off, I'd love to ask both you, Jeremy, and Jeff, before we get into the debate about which is his rookie or which is the better card, what do we think about the price differences of just the 86 Fleer basketball, number 57 Michael Jordan, literally selling in just the last few months, whether it be at REA for $168,000 just a couple months ago in April? What about Golden? Sold 2 examples in June, one on the 1st, one on the 30th. The one on the 30th sold for $207,000, and the one on the 1st sold for $292,000. So I guess my question is, we were talking about this just a minute before we went on camera here, and you're saying, wait a second, it's going to be good content. So my question for you gentlemen is it as mind-boggling to you guys as it is to me that a non-serial numbered card that isn't rare, right? Let's be clear. I've had, I don't want to say hundreds, but I've definitely had dozens, bordering on probably 100, not of the Star, of the 1986 Fleer. And I just don't think in my own mind that no matter how much nicer one example may appear than the other, I find those prices to be difficult to understand what's happening. I have my own thoughts and theories. I'm curious what you guys think about the prices of the 86 Fleer Jordan PSA 10 oscillating that much in a short time frame.
I think, to me, there's a few things that come into play. I'm curious to hear what Jeff says too, but I'm going to just start by saying that centering being the number one differentiating factor between different copies that I can visually see with the naked eye, I think that might be part of it. But I also think part of it is just the right time at the right place, the bidders being active at that time, the platform that it's being sold on. We're comparing Golden to PWCC to eBay to Heritage, and I mean, not everybody is registered and monitoring all of those different platforms. So those are the reasons why we're not. The sports card market is not as perfectly efficient as the stock market is, where that is the price, and they are fungible. These cards are non-fungible. They are all different one way or another, and so those are kind of my thoughts. I don't read too much into it other than it's just what happened on that day, aside from noticeable differences like centering. Jeff, do you have any further thoughts on it?
I'm on the same page as you, Jeremy. I think, the platforms are different. You have it on different days. I think centering definitely is a big differentiator because there's tolerance, within a PSA 10. And I also think that depending on that copy, if someone has 180,000 to spend on the card, they probably have 300,000. So, it just depends who's competing on that day. And I think that if they see a copy that they've sort of fallen in love with, they're going to go for it. And sometimes that means paying a little bit more.
I think that's right. Go ahead, Leighton.
I think that they're both excellent points. I wanted to mention one other point and then tell you the reason, or at least one of the reasons why I was bringing it up. So I think another thing is, and maybe very obvious to both of you, but maybe not so much the public who might be listening to this, but PSA has had a number of different versions of their holder itself. Mm-hmm. And there are some folks who really would prefer to buy not only just the holder, meaning the card to be in a modern holder of PSA, but they'd actually prefer to be graded in the modern times versus, let's say, 10, 12, 15 years ago, when maybe the standards weren't as stringent back then as that they are today. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's also something else to consider. I just wanted to throw that out there. I didn't do a full analysis of one card versus the other. And then one of the questions I wanted to ask, so if really the range of that card at the moment could be as low as 168 to 300, assuming we all had the liquidity and we wanted the wherewithal to do this, if that card's at 140 at auction, do you say to myself, you know what, I got to buy this because my low end is 168 and the high end is 300? Or are you thinking, because I'll go first? No, because to me, that card isn't traded every day like an 8's traded or a 7's traded or even a 9. As much as we think a 10 sells, it doesn't sell every day, regardless of the marketplace. And so I don't know if there's a right answer. I would just say be careful. In other words, if you're going in to buy a Jordan rookie, I guess what I would say to someone, if they had that kind of money and they had those resources, try not to fall in love with a copy. Try to buy value. Because wouldn't you like to be, even if it was centered a smidge worse, the person who paid in the 168 range than 300? You're bragging to everyone, look, I just bought a sweet Jordan, and you have to explain to someone it's 51.49 versus the other one, which is 52.48. And of course, I'm being somewhat facetious, but really it might actually be accurate. There might be some validity there. So curious if there are any thoughts on that.
Go ahead, Jeff. Let's
that didn't cross my mind initially, but I completely agree. I've lost count how many different holder variations there are now, but sometimes the flip will help tell you the era of maybe when it was graded. But that definitely makes a difference. The White House labels, I think if we did an analysis and look back a little bit, I would bet you that more often than not, the newer White House labels would sell for more than the older holders.
My thoughts are, Leighton, that to your question, I would rather have a strong centered 9 than an off-centered 10 and save a whack-a-dough. That's where that would be my personal preference. I'm not as interested in and I know you're facetious, but bragging about having a PSA 10. I'd rather brag about having the best 9 I could possibly find. I think that takes a much more savvy eye and collector approach. But what you said, and Jeff reiterated, that the slab itself, I think that's an amazing point that you made. It's an insight that not everybody's going to be aware of. Not everybody is as seasoned in this hobby as us three have been in the hobby as long. So if you're listening to this and you don't know why one might sell more for, one sells for 180, one sells for 300, it might be as simple as the holder that the card is in because of the perceived value for that particular holder. Jeff mentioned the Lighthouse label holders. That's one of the most recent PSA slabs. And I do believe that they sell for a premium because people want, as Leighton said, that more modern grading. The application of the standards are more stringent more recently. So, okay, very good stuff, guys. Leighton, anything else on that, or do you want to talk about any more about the star card?
Just in terms of the price, Jeff was mentioning off camera before we went live that he had a chance, and Jeff, I don't want to throw salt on your wounds over there, but I know that, you mentioned briefly that you think that the Jordan Star might be at a point where it's a little bit kind of out of your reach, if you will, in terms of your collecting focus and budget. Mm-hmm. And listen, I think many of us feel similarly, especially with the direction the card's going. And I just wanted to throw out there, of course, you can decide for yourselves, and that's what I want to do. I want to get your opinion, Jeremy, and your opinion, Jeff, and of course, anyone who's listening to this or watching on YouTube, we'd love your thoughts in the comments. For me, I don't get as much, not just excitement, but I actually get agita about buying a card that's hot. Now, if I'm buying a card that's hot, that's $40, I already know my downside. My downside is precisely $40. So it's not that much of a downside, but to be fair, some people, $40 might be a lot of money to them. So what I'm saying is I don't want to take anything for granted here. But in terms of the Michael Jordan Star rookie, or the Star card, I don't even want to label it the rookie yet, even though many are, and maybe they're correct about that. It does seem as though the card is red hot. I believe at the upcoming National Sports Collectors Convention, which is taking place very soon in Cleveland at the IX Center, the card is going to be one of the most asked about cards at the National. And so for me personally, I become uncomfortable, whether it be it's for my PC or it's for dealer inventory for Just Collect, to chase things that are just really red hot and I don't know when they're going to settle. Now, when I say settle, what I mean is maybe that card repeatedly sells in a 30, 60, or 90-day period in a similar or same grade for about the same money. But right now, Jeff, I think you and Jeremy would both agree that's not happening with the Star 84 number 101 Michael Jordan. It seems to be continually, increasing in price. And so my question for both of you is, even though I think we'd all agree, the three of us, it's a great card. It's a great card that's now coming with absolutely an increased price tag that wasn't there 12 months ago or even 24 months ago. So how do you both feel about that?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so I've been closely tracking that card ever since it started being able to be graded by PSA. And I've had it on my list, and I thought initially when they first started grading it, it was going to be hot out of the gate, and I think it kind of was. And then things sort of, went down a little bit. And then ever since that large sale that most people know about, one of the PSA 9s, one of the 3 PSA 9s, everything has sort of taken off like a rocket. And it's not just the higher grades, and that's in that issue like a 7 or an 8. We're seeing even the 4s, the 5s, the 6s make considerable jumps in values. And so with that, it kind of gives me, as Leighton mentioned, pause in terms of wanting to pick this up, even though it's kind of prime on my list of a card that I'm interested in. I just, based on experience, have a little hesitation right now in terms of jumping heads in, and think that, maybe budget could be spent elsewhere, even though it's such a great card.
I'm with you, Jeff, on that. I feel like I've missed the boat on the card right now, but I also feel like the boat is going to go all the way around the globe and come back eventually to me, and I'll be able to jump on again. And what I mean by that is kind of what, again, I don't want to just repeat what you guys are saying, but I'll put my own spin on it. I like how Leighton puts it. Like it's still in a period of volatility where we just don't know what the ultimate level off is going to be in terms of value. So do I want to buy one right now? Because we've been through some cycles recently where things shoot up and then they come back down and then they level off. So are we still in the shoot up phase? I don't know. Have we reached the max with that sale that Jeff just mentioned, which was $900,000 for a PSA 9? Have we reached the peak and now we're coming down a little bit? I'm not sure. I'm not on top of it as close. I don't want to buy into the curve where the curve is doing this. And these are big. I don't want to jump in here. I want to jump in after it does this, and then it just sort of, levels off somewhat. And those changes are much smaller. They're just little bumps versus peaks and valleys. So because the value of any card is always changing. One day to the next, 1 week, 1 month to the next, even a year to the next on cards that don't show up very often. So I want enough data points so that I'm comfortable that I'm getting in at its true value, because I missed the first boat. I'm too late to get in at a good value. I'm too late to buy a card for 15,000 that's now worth 30. So is that card at 30 now going to settle in at 20, 25, 30, or 35? I don't know, maybe 40 or 45. I'm willing to not take the risk now, wait long enough until I'm comfortable where I just see it stable. I just want stability. Once it stabilizes, I would be more willing to jump in. I hope I can afford it when that boat comes back around, the stable boat. I don't know that I will. And if I can't, as I like to say, guys, there's always more cards to buy. There's enough controversy. I don't know that the hobby will ever have consensus, which is the better card, which is the true rookie. Seems like the 86 Fleer is most commonly referred to as the rookie. I personally believe the Star 101 has more rookie card qualities to it than the 86 Fleer does, but I'm only one voice, and it doesn't matter all that much. So I will just use it to decide what I'm going to do. And I guess those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts on it, on that, Leighton.
Well, I think it was really well put, Jeremy. And I'm curious, just to kind of kick off this brief conversation about the 86 Fleer versus the 84 Star. Jeff, what's your feelings about the card? Do you consider one to be the true rookie, or maybe both of them his rookie, just like his 51 Bowman and 52 Topps are treated? Or do you have some other thoughts about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good comparison when you look at the two mantles and in differentiating those. I think 84 Star and 86 Fleer both have their legitimate argument. I'm kind of in Jeremy's camp, where I feel there's more qualities that kind of lend the 84, more or less being the earlier card as the rookie. But there's no refuting the fact of the popularity of 86 Fleer and how iconic that card is overall. And I don't think that will ever change. I don't think it should ever change. But that still doesn't take away from the Star being, potentially that rookie card. And I think, the more I've learned about it over the past couple of years, I think that there's a lot going for it that people may not have realized, 12, 24 months ago. And one that's come to light is just the rarity of the card comparing to 86 Fleer. So I've heard different numbers, and it's probably up for debate, but I think the consensus that I've heard is probably between 3,000 and 5,000 copies. And, the way that they were kept, being in bags, led to possible a lot of wear around the corners and damage to the card. So not only was it rare from a production point of view, but also add condition sensitivity on top of that. And production quality actually as well, because centering and those sort of things. So I think when you take all that kind of boils down to the rarity factor, and I think that by itself, with the demand for Michael Jordan, is a good recipe for a strong value card.
Very well put. I don't know why it just came to me, but I wanted to share this, that I remember for the 52 Topps Mickey Mantle, 1952 Topps, there was a period in which, like 3, 4s, and 5s, they all sold for like very similar money. It was bizarre. And I knew the card was maturing, Jeff, when I started to see real prices at those levels be distinct. Once again, centering is an anomaly. I get it on that card in particular. But in other words, 3s fell in this range, 4s fell in this range. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up with the MJ 1984 Star, number 101, potentially as rookie, is that it's starting to happen with the MJ card. A few years ago, it didn't matter if that card was really an authentic 3, 4, or 5. It basically all brought the same price. Mm-hmm. And now there's something distinct happening with a 5, or even a well-centered 5, or a 6. And so I don't have one. I do wish that I did, but my advice is, if you're going to go to the National and you have to have one, I think it's okay, and this might be the perfect instance, to just buy an authentic copy. Buy one that looks okay to you. It's in a Beckett or PSA holder. By no means it's going to be cheap, and it's going to cost more than it did 12 months ago. But maybe you don't have as much upside. you also don't have as much downside. And if you're someone who has to own it, then I'll tell you, I've seen firsthand a number of, not in PSA holders because they weren't grading at the time, a number of Beckett graded. They were inauthentic holders of the number 101 Michael Jordan star, but yet the card appeared like X mint or near mint. Maybe it was small, maybe it was trimmed, maybe it was in a screw down and it couldn't be graded because of the way that it compressed in the holder. That's my 2 cents. And by the way, please wait till I get my copy of the National and then go. Joking aside, this is all top of the head here, but I thought it'd be interesting to discuss.
My last comment on this card is that I believe when PSA announced about a year ago or so that they were going to start grading star cards again, they hadn't in many, many years because they didn't have the expertise. They announced that they were going to. That sent a message to the hobby that further legitimized the card. Now, I have a slight issue with that. And it's nothing against PSA deciding to grade. I think it's wonderful. I mean, people want that. So great for the hobby. But just because a grading company decides to grade the card again because they're comfortable doing so from an authentication standpoint, nothing changed about the card. So, you know, it something as simple as that had a profound impact on the way the card was viewed by the overall hobby. And by that, I mean, outside of those real passionate star collectors, and there's a contingent of them out there right now who've been, you know, advocating for these cards and their legitimacy within the hobby for so long. So I'm glad to see them get validated by PSA sort of agreeing and saying these are now worthy of our slabs. And I'm glad the PSA started to grade them again. Okay, let's wrap that up. Let's wrap up that talk. I'm sure we went longer than we wanted to, but since Jeff is still with us, we do the collector spotlight segment here on the Vintage Spotlight. And Jeff is our guest. Again, we wouldn't have brought him on, but he had a lot of great stuff to say about our first segment. So let's now transition into the collector spotlight and learn a bit more about Jeff. We've obviously learned something already, his insights into those two cards. But Jeff, tell us a little bit about what you collect. Your, from the vintage perspective, of course. Mm-hmm. Do you only collect vintage? Do you collect modern too? And what is it about vintage that you love so much?
Sure. So I've seriously collected graded cards for the most part for almost going on about 20 years now. And my focus is probably 95% vintage basketball. So I have a few modern cards, mostly because they're players that are in the Hall of Fame. And, I collect Hall of Famers and a few other adjacent sports, but it's basically vintage basketball. And I clearly love it. I think the reason why I went in that direction was not just for the love of the game of basketball, but also because of the history of the game, and the cards themselves have a lot going for them in terms of, I think, under the radar and rarity. And they didn't make as many vintage basketball cards. They only had 3 sets for the span of about 25 years or so. And there's so many Hall of Famers and rookies and et cetera in there. It's just something that I felt attainable for me at the time, and I just it took off from there. It's something where I'm, happy to kind of continue to be doing what I'm doing. And the only thing that's changed is I've started to also add autographs to that on vintage cards. Got into that about a year or so ago, and I've built up a couple small areas of that and having fun with it. By no means has that changed my focus of collecting non-autographed cards, but it's just something different that I decided to take on as well.
Right on. When you're speaking, I'm thinking to myself, why do I love vintage? Because I do too. And I think one of the main reasons I love vintage, I want to hear both of your thoughts on this once I explain what I'm thinking, is, you can take any vintage card from, even the 80s, but we're thinking the 1910s to the 1960s, generally, maybe the 70s. Take any of those cards. I'll pick on my favorite 48 Leaf Jackie Robinson, maybe 49 Leaf Jackie Robinson. Depends how you look at it. In any event, you can look at 25 copies in front of you, and they're all going to be different.
Mhm.
You take 25 Jordan 86 Fleers, they're not all that different. You take 25 Kobe Bryant Topps Chrome rookie cards, they're not really that much different at all. Maybe the centering shifts, but the edges are great, the corners are great. There's no staining. You take those vintage cards, they are all 52 Topps mantles. They're also different. I think, to me, that is one of the most fun parts about vintage, and one of the reasons why you need to be patient when you are acquiring a key vintage card for your personal collection. So, Jeff, I want to know, to you, how much do you focus on finding the right copy of a card that is important for your collection?
Sure. Well, maybe my shirt might say a little bit of something about that.
Strong for the grade.
So I'm a big eye appeal person as well. And as much as you have the urge to just jump in, I got to have a copy of this card. The reality is there's usually the vintage cards, usually a lot to choose from in terms of quality and price range and everything like that. And eye appeal, I think plays such a big part in it. And you can get a lot of value out of getting a beautiful looking card that appears a lot better than the assigned grade. So that's kind of how I collect for the most part. Sometimes I'll have a placeholder type of card until I find the right one. But for the most part, I try to find the best quality copy I can afford.
Yeah. I have a 1950 Bowman Otto Graham rookie card in a PSA 3 holder. It looks like it could be a strong 6. That's how nice this card is. And I feel like a winner. I feel like I've got the card and I've got all that difference, the premium value that you would have paid for a 6 over 3. I get to keep that money in the bank. I think that is such a savvy way to collect. And I wouldn't, I'm the kind of collector where I wouldn't trade my PSA 3 Otto Graham for an average 5. I probably wouldn't even trade it for an average 6 because I like the 3. Leighton, have you ever been in a situation where you could, even hypothetically, if you haven't been in it, where you've got a beautiful card, it's a low to mid grade, but it's nicer than some of those mid to high grade copies in 6s or 7s, and you're like, I'm keeping this one. Take business out of it. This is for your PC. Would you ever not trade a superior 3 for, say, a weak 6?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that for my PC, I just want the card that I like, that resonates with me. So if it's the lower grade version, I'm totally okay with that. I'm not stuck on the number. And it's interesting that you bring this up because we do a lot of set breaks through our breaking company, vintagebreaks.com. And when we do that, sometimes, Jeff, we'll have to, let's say, acquire a card because I bought a 68 top set and I'm making it up. It doesn't have the Johnny Bench or the Mickey Mantle, right? And so I'll go out, Jeremy, in the marketplace, let's say on eBay or whatever the case may be, and I'll try to buy that card. And I'll literally ask one of the team members here, hey, there's a really good deal on this 6, but this 4 is cheaper. And it's dead nut centered. The card looks amazing. Which do you think? And sometimes they're mixed, but inevitably we go for the better looking card because it's better looking, it's a better value, and that should show you, forget about for my PC, because maybe everyone feels differently about their own PC and what they like or not and don't like, but take this from a professional, meaning I'm trying to market these set breaks. I'm trying to get people excited. And what I'm telling you is, even though I might get someone who's not as sophisticated and they, for example, get a 68 Topps mantle because I got a slider 6. And for those that don't know what that means, it means a 6 that maybe on a different day would not get a 6, might get a 5, or whatever the case is. Point is, what we found in our community, especially, right, thus the name of the company, Vintage Breaks, for those that really appreciate vintage, and a lot of our customers do, they understand also what we're doing. So they don't think that we've done them a disservice. Quite the opposite. They might take that off-centered or that slider of a 6 of a 68 mantle and say, you know what? I'm glad I won it in a set break, but I'm going to off it. Whereas if they actually got a really well-centered 4, I can tell you most of them would keep it because they like that quality of eye appeal, Jeff, of the card.
Yeah, makes sense. Jeff, any thoughts to finish off that discussion? Then I want to see a few of your cards from your personal collection.
Yeah, I could, for eye appeal, like I said, I think we're on the same page of just getting that value, allowing you to kind of spread those resources elsewhere in your collection and kind of, build it up. And I'm always torn a lot as well because, I do the PSA set registry as well. And obviously the higher grade can be a draw, for the fact of if you're, where you rank in a set or it might be, but I've kind of come to the point where, I'd like to have the best, highest grade copies I can, but I'm also very well okay with having a lower grade copy if it looks just as sharp as the higher grade one.
And and I bet that's an approach that you had to really get your head around. I did too. When I started to realize that the technical grade isn't the end all be all and isn't reflective of the overall quality of the card in many cases, I had a Jean Beliveau 53 Parkhurst, a PSA 5. I also had a PSA 7. And I'm looking at them like, I'm keeping the 5. I'm going to keep the 5. I like it better. I'm going to sell the 7 and redeploy those funds. Jeff, can you show us a few cards from your personal collection? I think some people would like to see them.
Sure. Just have a couple that I picked up recently. And the first one I would say, this is my biggest find of the year so far. And it's a 57 Topps Bill Russell, but it has an autograph on it. And so one thing I've been doing is I'm from Boston, so the Celtics, mean a lot to me as a team, and I've put together a autographed rookie set of all the all-time Celtics. And so one of the toughest ones to come about is Russell. And one thing I just wanted to share about this one is it's a PSA 4, and it has a 9 auto, and it's vintage ballpoint. So a 9 auto for that is pretty strong. And there's about 80 or so copies graded of this card. And I don't know for sure, but in terms of period signed copies of playing day era, there might be a dozen or less. And out of those, this is the highest graded copy of the period signed. And if most people don't know about Bill Russell, is that he stopped signing his rookie card right around between 1960 and 1962. And he didn't start up again until well after he retired. So a lot of the copies you see now are Sharpie or paint pen or silver pen. And those are all, any Bill Russell autograph is amazing. It's great to have. But, knowing that this was signed during his playing days and kind of signed in the sweet spot and it's bold ballpoint is kind of a unicorn card that I was very happy to acquire earlier this year.
Congratulations. Very nice card. And to anybody who's listening on podcast right now, feel free to check out the YouTube version of this podcast so you can see these cards that Jeff is showing. All right, you have another one to share.
Yep, I have one more. And Leighton, this is the drum roll card.
Oh, wow. Is it an original photo?
So this is a postcard size photo. Looks like it was probably stuck in the back of an album. Yep. This is a Jerry West issue from the early 60s. And the little logo that you saw there is called All American Village, which was a boys' day camp in Mammoth Lakes, California.
That's cool.
And this I picked up at an auction recently, and it was consigned by the person that got it originally. They were a counselor at the camp. And so they got this copy of the card, and they actually got it signed by Jerry West. It was kind of hard to see when I showed it. But it's definitely a vintage signature on there too. And it was a unique piece that I had never seen before, so I decided to pick it up.
Congratulations. It certainly gives me some things to look for at the National. I didn't know that existed either. Love the story behind it. And just to FYI, Jeff, as I told you, so I collect vintage basketball. I've been doing so for quite some time, even though I'm doing it very slowly, and I haven't added anything new in a while, although I'll probably look out at the National. I started probably, I don't know, maybe about 8 years ago, possibly a little bit longer, working on the signed versions of 57 Topps basketball, 61 Fleer basketball, and 86 Fleer basketball. So I have the Russell in 57, but it's not the version that you have. It's more of a modern day version. No Chamberlain and no Jordan yet in 86, but I'm holding out hope.
Nice.
Well, there's 686 Jordans that now have autographs on them. We talked about that card earlier, obviously, and I didn't say it out loud, but I was thinking when those 6 Jordan cards that were recently broken out of PSA 10 slabs and autographed. Did that adjust the population report of the number of PSA 10 Jordan? Like, just when they add an autograph, does it come off the PSA 10 population? Does anybody know the answer to
Good
that?
question.
I'm pretty sure it doesn't, as long as it's dual service graded, and the card grade is also with the autograph grade.
Okay.
And I think, but because they cracked it out of the slab, their serial number might have changed.
Okay, fair.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, interesting stuff. All right. Good to see a couple cards from your collection there, Jeff. One that
Thanks for
Leighton had
sharing,
never
Jeff.
seen before. That's really cool stuff. Jeff, we're going to transition. National is coming up. A week today, I'm on an airplane heading to Cleveland from Calgary through Toronto. Jeff, you're going to be there. What are you looking forward to? What are your goals for the National?
Well, first off, I'm always looking forward to the National. And as Leighton said, it doesn't really matter where it is to me, because it's all about who is there, and there's always something different happening. So I always have a amazing time every year, and I try to make the most of it. Get in early, get in on Tuesday as well, and there till Saturday at this point. So for the majority of the time, the main thing that I'm always looking forward to is just, the cliche, the people and the networking and seeing friends and meeting new collectors and people that I haven't had an opportunity to meet, that I know who they are, and also people that I had never known in the hobby, and, get to meet as well, and kind of just sort of build that, build that collector network. And that's the biggest part for me. When it comes to other things, I would say, even though the price range is probably not ideal, I usually want to go and get a couple of cards graded or reviewed at PSA. And so I'll do that. And then for anything specific I'm looking for, the cards are secondary, as I mentioned. And aside from the Jordan 101, I'll say, I'm always on the lookout, and this could take me years and years, but to find the right copy of the 48 Leaf Jackie. That's always on my radar. And I'm also looking for an upgrade of my George Mikan that I have in my collection. So those are hard to come by as well, but if I see a nice copy, that might be something that I'd might have to go for.
Right. If you find any of those, you got to hunt me down. Let me know. I want to see them as soon as you get them.
Well, I have a shameless plug, gentlemen. So Jeff, I was hoping you'd stop by my booth at the National anyway. Our booth numbers for Just Collect are 1543 and 1642. But I believe I still have to have, I got to make sure I'm comfortable with it, but I believe I have a 1948 Bowman basketball graded set. I think the Mikan, I know I don't remember the exact grade, but it's all graded, the set. And, I'm going to have some fun basketball, but I also put out signs like buying vintage basketball because I'm trying to find great stuff. So Jeff, please stop by. I'm looking forward to connecting there.
Sounds good.
Are you breaking that set, Leighton, or are you selling it complete?
No, I'm going to offer it as a complete set. We're going to have a 33 Gaudy Sport King set. We're going to offer as a complete set. It's going to be a fun booth. Definitely
awesome.
Come by.
All right, Jeff, thank you for joining us today on the Vintage Spotlight. It's been great to have you, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
It was a pleasure, and see you both next week.
Jeff, thank you so much for joining us and spending the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
See you next week.
All right, Leighton. We have 2 segments to get through. One I'm going to spring on you. We didn't even talk about it earlier in the day, but we want to continue to talk about the National, some of your tips and tricks and that sort of thing. And then we got some viewer questions that came in. We got 3 of them. We're going to
get great.
Through. So I'm going to turn over to you now to give our audience, from a vintage perspective, what are some of your tips and tricks or noteworthy items to discuss about the National?
Sure. So as far as vintage, then it's a great point, Jeremy, because, for example, if you're going there and you collect modern or you're going there with your young kids, you might be really interested in some of the freebies and the promos that they're giving away. And even if you're not collecting modern, you still might want to keep an ear out for those or an eye out for those, because some of those exclusive to the National items can be sold or flipped right away on eBay let's say the following week, which of course can help supplement your collection, and ultimately you can buy what you actually care about. One of the things I think we all find ourselves, whether it be you're buying a modern or a vintage card, is you get to that first booth and you're like, oh my God, I'm ready to get, off the schneid. I'm going to make my first purchase. And then there's like a little bit of unless it's like super cheap, there's a little bit of hesitation. You're like, am I going to find a better example? Am I going to find a cheaper example? Am I going to find a place that also has other cards I need? So I'm going to roll it into a whole package. Let me tell you something. It's called paralysis by analysis. You can make yourself nuts, especially at a convention the size of multiple football fields, okay? So my advice is, if you like the card and if it's in the sphere of the range of the amount you're looking to pay, just buy it and execute. And if you don't, an easy trick, many of you, 93 different YouTube creators have already talked about this, but document where the card is. So take a picture, number one. Some folks recommend taking a picture above of the booth. I already have too many pictures I don't need on my phone. So what I do is I take a picture of the card and I literally just shorthand write I have a steno pad with me, the entire National, my backpack, and I write down the card, and in the right column I write the booth number. And that way, if I don't want it later, I literally just cross it off. Or if I bought that card somewhere else, I cross it off. But this is the final tip about that. Don't do all of that work, but then revisit it in 5 days, because I got news for you. Most of those are going to be gone. So I have a ritual. I do a daily check-in on my phone at the end of the day. So that way, even if I have the time to look at night, maybe the card that's a little bit more expensive or a little bit more unsure about, I will wait till overnight. But I can tell you, especially on that Tuesday of the National, I will be there at 8 a.m. and I will be there to the moment it closes at 4 p.m., sweating bullets because the AC is a little bit spotty on the first day there. And I'm going to make sure that I execute. So even if nothing all day, Jeremy, I'll have my notes so you can bet your bottom dollar for that last 60 minutes or so. I'm going to walk around executing. So that way I at least have something on the board for that Tuesday.
Yeah, I really like what you were saying about tracking the cards you're interested in if you're not going to execute on them at that exact moment. Now, you have your ritual where at the end of the day, you review everything. I'll tell you, I have seen a card I've wanted at the National, said, I'm going to walk around and think about it. I walk around, for 20 minutes. I've come back, the card's gone.
Of course.
So you can wait. You said you can wait 5 days till the end of the show to go back for it. It's almost guaranteed to be gone. You can wait till the end of that day. There's a strong chance
you're
be gone.
You're 100% right, Jeremy. Keep in mind, everyone has different goals. So, depending on what you're looking to accomplish, whether it be as a dealer standpoint or collector standpoint, make no mistake, I can tell you, I will probably take a break at some point that day to eat something, whether it be it's a granola bar, a chicken sandwich, anything at all. My point is, when I do that, I absolutely will do a check-in at the end of lunch, because you're right. I will not wait until the end of the day, even if it's only 7 cards. I'll look at the 7 cards I earmarked. Maybe I've only bought one. I'm like, you know what? I really like these 2. Right after lunch, I go back. And you're right.
Yeah.
I'm lucky if only one of those is still there.
The advice I give people is, if it's an important card to you and a card that you're not going to find several more times throughout the show, whether that's a low serially numbered card, if we're talking modern, if we're talking vintage, it might be, a mid-grade, high eye appeal copy that is just right for you. As we were discussing earlier, are you waiting for that right copy? I recommend don't wait, execute and buy it, because if it is that great of a card, someone else is going to pick it up, whether it's a collector or a dealer who wants to buy it for their inventory.
Asterisk is, as long as it's fairly priced, it's not 35% above what it should roughly sell for. And it's funny because I forgot to mention it, Jeff. I'll reach out to him, but I actually have a really great copy of a Jackie Robinson Leaf rookie. But you're right. What happens is, when a card is looking better than the grade indicates, the technical grade, and you're not exorbitantly expensive, I can already tell you from my inventory, that card's going to sell, this card's going to sell, this card's going to sell. And that's the reason why, because it's a fair value for the eye appeal and the technical grade. Altogether represents a very nice opportunity for someone to buy.
And this is the mecca of all card shows. This is the one time a year many people save up all their traveling shekels, as Leighton would say, to come to this one show. They're saving their card budget for this one show, and they are looking for that perfect 1933 Gaudy Babe Ruth or the T206 Ty Cobb or the 48 Leaf Jackie, whatever it is. They're waiting for these specific cards, and they're gonna be running through that show when they walk in on Wednesday, trying to find 3 or 4 to choose from. Then they're going to pray that the one that they ultimately decide upon is going to still be there when they go back to it. So that's a great tip. Don't think that those cards are going to be there unless it's a Topps Update Mike Trout rookie in a PSA 10 holder and there's literally 1,000 in the room. You don't need to, you can wait as long as you want on that. But if it's rare, if it's strong for the grade, don't wait too long. You might end up disappointed. And that, it might be the case. If your want list is small, that might have been the only card you would buy at the show. You might leave empty-handed. And then you have to decide, are you going to buy something just to buy something because you came all this way to the show? That's up to you. But, be careful because that money could go towards next year. You find that card that you slept on a bit too long this time. Leighton, lots of auction houses sell great vintage cards. There's going to be a lot of auction houses at the National. They always are. They're kind of congregated to certain areas within the floor plan. I want to share a website with everybody if I can right now. It's called Auction Report. Leighton, I know you're really familiar with auction. This is auctionreport.com, everybody. If you're listening, auctionreport.com. If you're watching, you can see the website here in front of us. And it's a great website, tons of resources, and they have a article or a page within the site right now. Basically, I'll read it. It says, visit the companies featured on Auction Report at the National, July 24 to 28, 2024. And you can scroll through and see all the different auction houses that are going to be set up with their booth numbers, whether they're in the corporate area or not. It looks like most of them are, but not all of them are. So go check that out, auctionreport.com, and find it. Leighton, is there anything you'd like to highlight on this website or any of the auction houses that will be there that you'd like to specifically mention?
Sure. So first off, Ryan Friedman, who is the founder of auctionreport.com, he's a great friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. The coolest part about Auction Report is it's legitimately great information if you're a hobbyist like Jeremy and I. And if you're listening to this, you're likely a hobbyist also, and it's free. So you get all of this amazing information. You don't have to give them your newsletter, your email for a newsletter. You don't have to give them your text, your cell phone, so he'll text you stuff. If you want, I'm sure you can do that. But my point is, if it's like a Tuesday night, and I'm like, you know what? I don't want to bid on eBay, but I don't even know what auction houses are going on right now. I mean, like what auctions are concluding tonight or this week. Inevitably, I go to auctionreport.com. I look at their schedule, I see what's cooking. And as you mentioned, that's a great tool for the National right on one page. If you're looking to see Steve Hart from BBC, you want to drop off some stuff with Brian Dwyer from REA, you want to say hi to our friends Derek and Lee from Heritage, you want to give some love, pun intended, to Love of the Game, Al and his gang, Mile High, Memory Lane, you can hold the Honus Wagner. I mean, like, they're all going to be there. And what's really cool, they're all likely going to have something for you of value, meaning you get to hold the Wagner at Memory Lane's booth. Maybe REA is offering a certain commission if you consign, right then. I know Mile High in the past gave away like a 52 Topps mantle in a random, drawing, and you had to consign cards at the show to be eligible for it. There's so much to do, and it's a wonderful guide to some of the auction houses that will physically be at the National.
And a lot of these auction houses will be displaying the items from their upcoming auctions in their showcases. Mm-hmm. And if nothing else, it's a great opportunity to consider this a visit to the vintage sports card museums, because each of these auction houses have so many vintage cards on display that not many of them are going to be for sale. Again, they will be cards that are featured in their upcoming auctions. They will have their auction catalog, the hard copy books there. They often have them to give away to people. Makes for great coffee table type books, future reference material as well. Pick up some of those. They're heavy though, so you don't want to break your shoulders because they are long days and hard floors in these convention centers. But it's a great opportunity. As far as the National goes, Leighton, like Jeff said earlier, I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. We get to do that once or twice a year. I'm going to be hosting podcasts at the Nationals podcast booth. So I'm going to get to do some content there. I'm excited about that. One of the things I like to say about any card show I go to is that I'm going to buy some cards there. I don't know what they're going to be, but that's the thing. I don't know what they're going to be. That is so exciting that, 10 or 12 days from now, I'm going to have one or more new cards in my PC in my collection, and I have no idea what they are at this point in time. There's a couple cards I'd love to add. I don't know if I can afford them right now. We will see, but I can't wait to see what I come out of there with, and I can't wait to see, Leighton, maybe we'll find a few more guests to come on the Collector Spotlight here on Vintage Spotlight. We'll wrangle some guests for that as well. It's such a great week. I can't wait. Is there anything anything else you'd like to mention about the National?
Well, I wanted to mention for the auction houses, if you go to the auction houses, first of all, tell them that Jeremy and Leighton said hi from the Vintage Spotlight. I'm sure that they would appreciate that, the love. And of course, being able to check out the items themselves, Jeremy, is a great point, because even if you don't bid on the items, it's a lot different. And the catalogs that some of these auction houses have are amazing. But to actually hold like a tip-top Honus Wagner or a rare back T206 Ty Cobb, even if you have no intention of buying it, to me is super cool. And another thing, Jeremy, because I think it's a great added tip for anyone going to the National, you can actually ask an expert at that booth, at that respective auction company. I see something on the back in that upper left corner. What do you see? I'm not sure if is that a tear that I see, or is that, I don't really quite understand. And by the way, if you don't get the question answered right at the booth, you want to take a picture, you want to hit up Jeremy or I, you could do so, I'm sure, on social media, or find us at the convention. We'd be happy to help.
Yeah, definitely. All right. I can't wait for the National. It's going to be fun. I like that you pointed out, if you are listening to this, if you are a vintage collector, which I'm sure you are if you're listening, and you do go by those auction houses, inspect some cards, enjoy them. You're not going to see these cards in such high grade in hand all the time. And yeah, say hello from Leighton and I here at the Vintage Spotlight. Okay, Leighton, before we wrap up, we're going to try and keep this episode under an hour. We had some questions come in. We put out a post on Instagram asking for some viewer mailbag type questions. And the first one came from our guest from last week. Corey said, what vintage set needs more love in the hobby? Leighton, I'm going to ask you to answer this one. What vintage set needs more love in the hobby? What comes to mind first for you? I know it's a tough question. You got to rack your mind through all of them.
It's tough to narrow it down to one, but if I was going to say it's probably the most aesthetically pleasing, or one of the most aesthetically pleasing, they didn't come in packs. You had to do stuff through the mail. And what's great is, if you can't afford the Ty Cobb in the set, or the Walter Johnson, the Mathewson, or the Cy Young, you can get a common that's presentable for like $100 or $200. And I'm talking about the T3 Turkey Red set. Because legitimately, like, if I showed one of those to my mother, and my mother hates cards, there was tons of them in the house growing up. I can still hear her yelling, "What the hell are you doing down there? All these cards." But yet she does appreciate beauty. And if you look at a T3 Turkey Red card, I mean, you could buy a common player for $100 to $200. If I was looking to dive into the vintage market and all I had was a couple $100, I didn't care about investment. I didn't need a name. I just wanted to have something that not only that I admired, but if I showed mom or I showed grandma, someone that had nothing to do with the hobby, what would they appreciate? T3 Turkey Reds are my vote.
Interesting answer. And the set that comes to mind for me, based on a few of the cards, is the 53 Topps baseball set. Because 52 Topps baseball, the key guys have such premiums on them. The 53s, though, the Willie Mays is probably my favorite vintage card design of all time, design aesthetically speaking. That second Topps card, Mickey Mantle. I think there's good value in that 53 Topps, and it's as beautiful of a set as 52 Topps. Want to thank on Instagram True Card Adventures for that question. Leighton, question number 2 is from NFL_history_in_memorabilia on Instagram asks, at the National, what is the percentage of vintage dealers compared to modern? Leighton, what's your perception of that?
I don't know the percentage, but I would say this comfortably. Out of all of the conventions, it's the healthiest percentage of vintage dealers versus modern, other than maybe the Strongsville show in Ohio.
Yeah.
So that's the best way I could say it. Meaning in terms of volume, it'll be unlikely you'll find a bigger volume of offering of vintage cards from different dealers. And I'm not even counting the auction houses.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's about 50-50. I think this will be my 17th national here next week. And, I walk the floor, you walk into this is Cleveland. This will be my third Cleveland national, but you go to Chicago, that you walk in that main entrance, that whole first room is basically vintage. And then it gets more modern as you head kind of to the right.
But do you know why that is? Do you want to know why that is?
Is that seniority?
It's seniority. It's simply because, and I'm serious, if you want to go to the National and you want to pay homage to the people who laid the groundwork, because this is who these people are, you might even look at some of their booths and think like, I don't understand why this person's coming to the National. It's because they've been coming to every National since 1980, since the first one.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Jeremy. I didn't know your history. So I've been to a bunch of Nationals in a row. Every National since 1998 Atlanta. The only one that I wasn't at was the one that was canceled in 2022 for Atlantic City. So you realize between us both, we've basically been to 42 Nationals, which I got to tell you, it makes me personally feel like an old man.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of them. And the last question, we've answered it already, but I want to shout out to on Instagram, Josh_and_Maxi asked, is the National the biggest show for vintage baseball? I think you answered that already, Leighton, outside of Strong's. Clearly it is. 100% without a doubt it is. Second might be the Strongsville show, which I've never been to, but I got to get to. Do you concur with that response?
Absolutely. And I know we're trying to wrap up here, so we got about 30 seconds or so before we hit that hour mark. So I had a note down here, and it might mean something different to each of you, but I think that's what's fun. Do yourselves a favor as a collector, as a patron, as a mom going, as a dad, as a friend of a friend, an uncle, whatever the case is. Try to help each other out. And that might even be where a dealer helps you and you help a dealer. If you had a pleasant experience with a dealer, if you came back and you brought them a pretzel or a bottle of water, I'm telling you, they would be floored. You would probably get a big kiss on the cheek or a discount on your next card. But it goes beyond that. Try to help a fellow collector. If they're at a booth and they're struggling, don't necessarily get involved right in the middle of it. But if they turn their back, say, I saw you might need some help about how to value your card in a trade. Do yourselves a favor. We're all part of the same community. We all love the hobby. If we didn't, we wouldn't be going to the IX Center in Cleveland. So those are my closing thoughts. And I'm really looking forward to meeting, I'm hoping, as many of you as possible next week.
As am I, guys. Please keep in mind, this podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please subscribe, leave a review, a rating. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the Vintage Spotlight YouTube channel, as well as the Just Collect YouTube channel and the Sports Cards Live YouTube channel. Be sure to follow our earlier guest, Jeff Hart, at Patriot_Sports on Instagram. And with that, everybody, this episode of the Vintage Spotlight podcast is now over.